You're probably aware that there were some documentation sent out, I think it was in March last year, about reducing teacher workload. And we've been working with our trainees, both primary and secondary trainees, to try and develop their understanding about how to manage their workload in relation to marking, in relation to planning, and in relation to data handling and things like that. The documentation was quite meaty. And I felt it would be really helpful for me to I found a summary document that outlines what the key messages in relation to marking, in relation to planning, and in relation to data. And literally it was just to share these with you and to encourage you, if you are, I'll send this out electronically, it's much prettier electronically. And the reason I want to send it to you is twofold, because Martine and I met at a secondary partnership committee meeting recently. And we were saying, actually, from our perspective as teachers in settings, it's really important that we know what our rights are with regard to what we can demand, what the demands that can be placed on us with regard to workload. So leaving it around your staff room might be quite handy, such that you can refer to it for your own point of view. But I think also in terms of encouraging the trainees who come into your settings to be mindful of their workload. Trainees are not expected to do any more than 80. The maximum a trainee can do during final placements is 80%, and we try and encourage them not to go beyond that. And I think making sure that they're aware of what is expected of them would be really helpful. So literally that's all my slot was to raise awareness of this documentation, and rather than trawl through the full 3 documents, which are really big, provide you with a summary. And that's it really. So Martine, I'll send you a glossy one so you can leave it out. Is that okay? Is that okay, Pete? That was it, really. It was all done for me. So.
Can I just ask, is that a critique of it or just a summary of it?
It's the summary of them.
It's not a critique
No.
that you take to the head and say, why are we doing all this marking?
Well, it actually does, because it highlights what reports recommend that one should be doing, but it also highlights actually what one shouldn't be doing,
Right.
what the actual Ofsted expectations are in relation to marking and to planning. Because it's almost like a bit of a myth buster, I think, in terms of what Ofsted expectations are and what one should and should and indeed not be expected to do. So it's kind of a critique that was done by these bodies at the bottom as a collective group.
Rosalie, anybody any questions? Right, Rosalie, thank you
So
very
that's
much.
it, but I will give you the glossy version of this. It's much tidier. Thanks.
It's just because we've got your ladies going. So if you just want to hang on to it, so we pick up there. Thank you. Helps out the copy on 2 lines. Right, okay. Rachel from Lynn, are you ready to do yours or this?
This genuinely isn't anything probably groundbreaking or anything like that, and you're probably already doing it anyhow. My role, I took on the professional mentor role in September because we've got a gentleman who's been professional mentor for a number of years now, and he's doing phased retirement, so we were looking at where it goes. So I, as assistant head in terms of teaching and learning, they said that'll go in your area there, so I ended up picking up at that point. So being new to the teaching and learning role and to the professional mentor role, I took the opportunity just to review where we're at. Particularly because LIM has been going through a couple of changes. If anybody knows about us, we've had a new head now for 2 years, but previously to that we had 2 years where we had interim heads while we were sorting out our headship. So there was a number of reasons why we needed to review it. The other thing for me was that we have a number of training institutions that we actually have within the school context. So our main one is actually University of Manchester, but we're also involved in Troops to Teachers. We're part of the Skip Rational Mersey, Edge Hill University, Chester University. We do an FE placement with Staffordshire University, and we haven't got any trainees this year, but we have got, I don't know what's happening, but we have got some involved with MMU, but not this year. I don't know what it's doing.
What does it say?
AFG, AVG even, don't know. Try it in this way.
Is it after a password?
No, please wait while it applies your security settings. It's not my laptop, so.
Stuff.
Is it? Right, is it? Can't go to the next slide. There we go. It's happened. Right. We've also got a range of different ones. We have a number of students who come in from primary placements to get Key Stage 3, as many of you will do as well. As I said, we've got somebody doing sixth form, and then we have them throughout the whole year. So we started off in September, we had about 12 trainees at that point. This point we're down to about 4, and then obviously in the next couple of weeks they're going to be picking up again. And they are literally in nearly every single subject that you can possibly think of. So it was an opportunity for me to try and review it, and at the same point I was informed not doing it. There was different standards. As you may probably be aware that the professional development for teachers came out last July, and within that it talked about, and I think it links to a couple of the items later on today, about how we need to work in partnership with training institutions and how it should be seen all as a progressive CPD going forward. So we took this opportunity to look at what roles we have within school, who's currently involved with it, and what they might like to get involved with. We reviewed all of that, and what we did is we looked at our CPD in particular had particular gaps for teachers at the chalk face. We were quite good at supporting teachers who wanted to go on to become leaders or senior leadership. Give up. Or senior leadership team. Can I get mine in front of me, because then I know what I'm talking about. Quite good at looking at senior leadership teams, leadership roles for middle leaders. Our QT programme was very comprehensive, but there wasn't much in our programme for teachers who wanted to stay within the classroom and just continue the way that they were doing so. So we looked at that one, and the other thing is part of the document also wanted to highlight how performance management should be highlighting CPD as well. So within that, we now have a recommended professional development course that we ask all teachers to choose an area of performance management and how that will be specifically tied to CPD. And one of the ways we're doing now is that some of them are looking at exploring being subject mentors, taking on different roles within the teacher training, or actually establishing themselves as subject mentors and even coaching within there. We identified we've got a lot of experienced staff, a lot of well-qualified staff, but they didn't want this sort of promotion to the next level, so to speak. And we're very fortunate we don't have a shortage, even in subjects where there are national shortages. We've got full staff in things like science and ICT. So we wanted to use them as much as possible. In terms of our weakness, I identified that because we had a big change about 3 years ago, we actually had 49 staff leave in 1 year. So we had a huge number of staff join all at once. But we found that they weren't signing up to being subject mentors. We were going to the old stalwarts who would do a very good job, but there was nobody sort of coming through in terms of making sure we had a progression. It was the same staff committing to it, as I also mentioned, and obviously you've got the pressures which everyone's got at the moment about, class workloads and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that we could try and deal with that before it became a problem. We had to keep saying maybe to the universities, we can't help you, we haven't got enough capacity this year. So we looked at what we've actually got available, and there were a number of opportunities without taking on the whole subject mentor role that we were going to use. First of all, one of our twilights, we divide our twilights in terms of we have 4 full inset days, but we break down one of the inset days for twilights. One of them every single year in the autumn term is a progression, a career twilight. And in that one we will run aspiring leaders, aspiring middle leaders, RQT, NQT workshops. And the other one that we run is a becoming a subject mentor. So it's for those people who may be interested but don't want to make that total commitment straight away. We get a group of our current subject mentors to come along. They talk about what the role is. They deliver the CPD themselves rather than me saying it's a really good opportunity. They talk openly and honestly, so they talk about what the role actually involves, what can be the difficulties, what can be the strengths and what you can get from it and how to manage your time. So it's a really honest thing. It isn't sort of a promotion of this is fantastic. It's a true honest representation of what it is to be a subject mentor. What we also then is we built in opportunities to say if you don't want to be a subject mentor in itself, you could still be a class mentor. So for this class, the trainee will come in and work with you and you will coach them just through that year class. It could be year 7 or it could be year 9, for example. So they can start getting their toe in the water without being fully committed to the subject mentor. That still means they're doing the observations, they're going through the planning and all of that, but it's just with one class more than most of the timetable. We obviously then encourage them to become subject mentors, and what we then do is ask them to reflect on whether or not they would like that to be a performance management target for themselves. When we did it as well, we also looked at the reasons why staff weren't signing up at this point. Some of them lacked the confidence to do it. They didn't think that necessarily they were good enough to be able to do it, so we wanted to sort of give them a boost and reassure them that they were. They weren't sure what the role entails, so that was why the training comes in October, to make sure that they've got clear understanding about what they're committing themselves to. Some of them hadn't been asked or approached, so they thought that they were sort of not being considered at that point. So by launching this again and making it totally new, not going to the same people, not keeping it behind the closed doors, we actually had about 3 new staff that stepped forward this year to say I'm quite interested within it, and they've now taken on different roles within that role as well. The other thing I should say as well is if they didn't want to become a subject mentor, and I forgot to include this in here, because we've got a training programme throughout the year for the trainees, they can actually just do an hour's training after school with them. So it's another way of pulling them forward without committing to a whole base or a whole placement. So they could either do a workshop, they could be in charge of a class, or they could be a subject mentor. And obviously the key one always is time, isn't it? Having enough time to do it. So rolling this forward, every year now we're committed to having a twilight that is on CPD progression, and that will always include something about a subject mentor within there. We've highlighted as many different staff as possible to deliver workshops. It's not just reliant upon our middle leaders. We do ask all teachers to share good practice. We've got different ones about technology, like the use of clickers. We have somebody doing data and various things like that with them. We have got it on a list of recommended CPD activities which could become part of the performance management, and every member of staff has to choose a CPD as part of their targets. We get them involved in a step way, so just sort of get their interest at that point and then recruit them after that one. And sort of building on that to give them the confidence, I do a joint observation with all of them at some point throughout the year. Usually it's just once at the beginning of the year and then see how we go, but if we've got any uncertainty or they're not certain themselves, I'm more than happy to go in and support them. And what we also do is we encourage the subject mentors to get further CPD by coming to sessions like this and whatever the training institutions would offer. But we also made it a bit more collaborative, because it used to be that they were just working in isolation within their subject areas with their trainees. So what we did this Christmas is we're quite fortunate, we've got some catering students. They actually cooked them a Christmas dinner with Christmas pudding, and they all sat down, they all talked together. We do group emails now, so they feel that they're getting all the information and they're sharing ideas. We meet probably once every half term just to check everything's going okay, and if they've got any difficulties and sort of share it. So it's more sort of a cultural thing now, and there's more sort of opportunities for all staff who maybe possibly hadn't thought about it before. And as I said, we've been quite successful so far. We've got 3 new ones. That's everything from me. Are there any questions? Like I say, it's probably something everyone's doing anyhow, but we just want to...
How many trainees do you tend to take?
We take what we possibly can. As I said, in September we ended up with 12, but we're down to 4 now just because of what was on offer and various options available, maternity leaves and things like that. But yeah, we've probably got a capacity of about 15 in total.
Thank you.
Okay, now we've called this managing a struggling trainee, but this is not going to be us telling you how to manage a struggling trainee. It's open for discussion. We've put this PowerPoint together based on our experience of various trainees. So can we ask you first of all, what would you call a struggling trainee? What do you understand by that? If you just want to discuss with somebody next to you, or tell us what you understand by a struggling trainee.
Be struggling in any way, balancing home life or...
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, like not achieving their targets, so their weekly targets they're
Yeah.
setting and not being able to achieve them.
Could be specifically struggling with a class.
Yes.
Certain kind of like level, maybe middle set rather than top or bottom.
Any other?
I'd be having personal problems
Yeah.
with the whole circumstances for a short period of time.
I mean, absolutely, you've anticipated exactly what we have thought. That there are all kinds of different causes, aren't there? Because we're dealing with individuals when we're dealing with trainees. So it could be a particular personality, just not dealing with it, or specific personal problems that are impacting upon their course. One of the things that we've come across occasionally, and perhaps you have too, is that sometimes they don't really want to be a teacher, and they think they did, but once they're you know, they've done it for a few weeks, they think, actually, maybe I don't want to be a teacher. Sometimes they don't cope with the workload, and as I've said, and the social life. I think lots of young people don't anticipate how much work it is, and it ruins their weekends being a teacher. Or it might be, as you said, some specific problem in the classroom, such as behaviour management, or even a particular class that they don't deal with. Now, all of these things are probably familiar to everybody, aren't they? And probably with all of them, you have measures that you would put in place to deal with these things. Does everybody immediately in their minds think, yes, I'd do this, yeah, we all. But there's another one. They just can't teach. And this is the type of struggling trainee that this presentation is about today, because we have found this the most challenging of all different types of struggling trainees. Has anybody had this? Yes. Is it sort of, go on. Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to say something. No. Yeah, it happens. And we have had trainees who don't make it and have to leave. And it's a real tension, isn't it, when we have somebody who actually just can't teach in the classroom, because we don't want to pass people who shouldn't be teachers if they can't teach. But on the other hand, we don't want to disenable people if they really, really do want to be a teacher. So what we're concerned with, and this does come directly from a couple of experiences this year, hasn't
This year,
it?
absolutely.
Yeah. Is trying to put in as much support as possible without compromising our own professionalism, when what we have is a trainee who really wants to be a teacher, but what we're seeing is that they, just can't make it in the classroom. So we're offering our opinions rather than, any prescriptive ideas of what you should do. We are no more expert than you in suggesting what to do with this type of trainee. So we thought, well, what is it? And again, we are obviously thinking of a trainee that we have in mind here, but we're not going to talk about particular names or we've tried to generalise it. So when they just can't teach, we think that these are the characteristics of that person, that they can't act on feedback. No matter what you tell them to do in the classroom, they don't do it. Or they make the same mistakes over and over again. So you observe again and you're seeing the same errors. And then what happens is their confidence diminishes because, they're being knocked. And then they get nervous because they get scared that they're going to fail. But the whole time that this is happening, they still want to be a teacher. Then what happens is classes can become disaffected, which exacerbates that inadequate teaching, and then they're struggling with the demands of the work. So this is the profile of the struggling trainee who really wants to be a teacher but can't teach. Does anybody want to add anything to this, or is there any that you think is of most significance here?
I think there's another element.
Okay.
You do get some that believe they're the best thing since sliced bread.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
whatever you tell them, just it doesn't go in.
Okay, yes.
So you've got a very definite opinion that
Yeah.
they can't teach. They have a very definite opinion they can teach.
Yes. Yeah. That sort of that's a combination of the personality and can't teach, isn't it? And we did discuss this. You can't give a precise profile of everybody because everybody is an individual. So sometimes, yes, you're also dealing with another aspect of a person who just really can't get it in the classroom. If you have a personality that's a little bit stubborn as well. So, difficult. So we looked at this last bullet here, struggles with the demands of work, and what do we mean by work? And this, we thought, well, what does it actually mean? What does being a trainee mean? It doesn't just mean going into a classroom, doing lots of teaching. What else do they have to deal with, apart from just being in a classroom and teaching?
Travel.
Sorry?
Travel,
Absolutely, yeah, commuting,
Professional duties,
yeah,
attending parents' evenings, duties on the corridor.
yeah, yeah,
Relationships with other staff.
yes, dealing with us. There are loads of things, aren't there? Absolutely, when you think about the overall workload, and in fact what we do as teachers all the time, it's really easy to underestimate how difficult it might be and what the pressures might be on somebody, because we've all been doing it for quite a long time and are used to it. So we broke this down into these kind of areas that, first of all, there is a massive teaching workload. There's organisation. I mean, we developed those organisational skills, so they're probably second nature to all of us as teachers now. But learning to be organised is a massive thing when you're a trainee and don't even know what you've got to be organised about. There's the paperwork. Being a form tutor, which has its particular stresses and demands, we expect them to do extracurricular. There's often a commute, as you said, which is very, I mean, possibly there's a commute for some of us as well, but you know, that is an extra stress in the day. There are the meetings after school and the observers. Being observed all the time is also a massive stress. So what we were thinking here is going back to that profile of the just can't teach trainee, but who really wants to and who is being cooperative rather than being stubborn. These feel like massive extras on top of just going into that classroom and trying to do some teaching. So despite the fact that we understand the profile of this trainee, and what we're seeing still is unsatisfactory, inadequate lessons every time we go in and observe. So by this point in the term, we might even be a few weeks on. And what can we do about it? Do you want to just have a read through of these and discuss what you think about what we feel are the measures that we would put in place to begin with? This is more or less following the process the university would want you to follow. And so, of course, you know, naturally these are the things that we would first of all put into place. But the bullet point that we think is the most important here is this one: to tell the trainee the truth. It's difficult, this, because if the subject mentor early on starts telling a trainee that their lessons are, you know, inadequate, it can diminish the confidence. But we still think that as soon as you know there's a problem, the trainee has to know that they are not meeting the standards. And this goes back to the stubborn trainee, you know, perhaps who doesn't believe you. We are both professional mentors in the school, and so as soon as it reaches the point where somebody has flagged up a trainee who is not really making it, we would both speak to them at some point so that there can be absolutely no argument about it and no negotiation. If we feel that they're not making it, then they have to accept that they are not.
And then certainly argument at a later date as well, maybe if it comes back later, you know, I didn't really know it was that bad, I don't, you know, it's avoiding that sort of thing as well.
We're avoiding the trainee who 3-5 weeks into the placement says, I don't know why you're saying this to me, it was going so well. So we do think you have to be absolutely honest with them. So we would request an early visit. It might be by the point that this is a problem that it's an additional visit, not an early visit. So what we would do, ideally, after that visit from the university, we would first of all devise with the subject mentor short-term targets and link them specifically to the RI in the grading matrix. We would also inform the trainee, keeping this, you know, absolute honesty without being horrible to them, of course, tell them that the next lesson has to show improvement in those specific areas. We would also probably revise the timetable to minimise the impact on the pupils, because by this point, and you must all have the same thing, the greatest worry is that the inadequate teaching is affecting the kids in the classroom. So we would take out some of the lessons, and this would also provide more planning time. We feel that planning is probably one of the biggest problems with trainees. Is that true generally? That they don't spend enough time on the planning, they don't think enough about the planning, so we would want that time to be spent on planning. And we'd also arrange for the trainee to observe good teaching. Now, I know we do this anyway, especially in the induction period, but at that point, they're observing in sort of randomly, yeah? That's how it works for us anyway. They go and see a range of different classes and different subjects, but now we would tailor the observations to suit the exact weaknesses that we're seeing in the classroom. So we would try to do this. And of course, this raises the big question of, when do you give up? So that is a question. When do you give up? Have you been in that situation? Have you been in that situation and the trainee doesn't agree? Any discussion about this at all? Because we think this is a real issue. We didn't know when we should give up with this trainee. Any comments? Anybody had an experience that?
You flagged it up there, and then somebody comes in from the university and equally corroborates what you're saying.
Yeah.
And there's still no improvement. I mean, it's very clear in after that. There's still no
Well,
improvement.
in effect, the decision's then taken out of your hands anyway, because it becomes the university.
That isn't our experience. That the decision was taken out of our hands because the university didn't say, well, we are going to fail this trainee now.
I've had it where they've said we're going to fail this training.
When they've said that, have they guillotined the practice? Or does the trainee kind of carry on for the
trainees
remaining weeks?
had a formal sit down with somebody at the university and said, this is where we're at, and if there's no improvement, I think it was a 2-week period, and it was over by Christmas.
Okay. With the trainee that we have in mind, he was very borderline, and so it wasn't absolutely clear that he should go. And because he was a trainee who really wanted to be a teacher, we felt that we should go as far as we could. So we didn't actually give up at the point that we might have, if you see what I mean. We thought that even though there was still no progress, we did not give up, because the trainee really was so desperate to be a teacher and keep on trying. And we found that actually he did make progress, but it took right up into the last week of the placement. We put in some non-threatening lesson observations. Now, I know that sounds like a total oxymoron. There's no such thing as a non-threatening lesson observation. But we talked to him a lot, and we set only one target for the trainee for the next lesson. Because by this point, his confidence was so diminished that to expect him to achieve an awful lot in the next lesson was unrealistic expectation. So we kind of hooked it all back a bit and said, okay, in your next lesson, we just want you to do this one thing. That allowed him to make some small steps of progress and slightly rebuild his confidence. We remained totally honest with him so that he knew all the way through that there was no guarantee that he was going to get through and pass the placement. But we were sympathetic, because at no point did this particular trainee ever say, I don't want to be a teacher, I can't stand what you're doing to me, I'm sick of being observed, I'm so stressed, I want to die. He didn't ever reach that point. He still wanted to be a teacher. We didn't allow any excuses. You know, the subject mentor didn't tell me I wasn't doing this, or what other excuses did we think are possible?
It was mainly I just wasn't aware that things were so bad so early on, as it were.
And we spoke
anything really other than looking at oneself and saying it's about me.
Yeah, and you've got to improve yourself. We made the subject meetings entirely about planning, because if you get the planning right, then all the other aspects, I feel, can be worked on more. If your plan's out, then the lesson is just a mess. So we spent all of the time on his planning skills. And then we did eventually, of course, have to reach the point where there was a deciding... I've lost my heading off that. Never mind, it should say the final decision on the top here. We did decide there had to be, eventually a final decision, and often, that is with the university, and it was a joint observation. And the trainee was fully informed that it was a make or break observation. By this point, the university had said to us that the decision was to be ours, even though they had seen a lesson that was borderline RI inadequate. And so we went into that lesson with just the view, can we see that this trainee has made any progress? And he did. And the reason that he did get through the placement, not with outstanding, and I doubt that he will ever be an outstanding teacher, but we did not want to disenable somebody who had such a strong will to be a teacher. For goodness sake, we do sometimes pass people who don't want to be teachers, which in the long time might be far worse than this kind of trainee who really wanted to be a teacher. He just took a long time to learn the steps and to get over the knocks to his confidence. So he has now gone on to his second placement, and we await with bated breath to see whether he passes that. He may not, but we feel that we did our best, and he did go to his second placement with enough confidence to teach a lesson if he'd spent enough time planning on it. So final, that's because I actually did the animated and I forgot. Never mind. Should be another one on. It's final thoughts. Now, we're a school direct provider. This perhaps goes back to what you were saying before about the university just sort of takes over the decision. So we have some control, like the HE provider. First of all, over the next placement. So obviously the context of our school perhaps didn't work very well for this trainee, and we tried to tailor the next placement to suit the trainee a little bit better. If you don't have school direct, obviously that's out of your control. Also, because I do some school liaison work for Peter, I can QA the school that takes the trainee. So I can go into the next placement. I haven't dared to do that yet, being a total coward about it, but there you are. And finally, the final placement can also be tailored around the insights gained from the second placement. And on occasion, what we have done is we've had a trainee go to a totally different school again for the third placement if it enables them to become a teacher, if they really want to be a teacher. So that is it, and I hope, go on, any thoughts, Tom?
Because obviously the University of Manchester thing is 1-2-1, so we get them back. Are you saying that you don't do that at your school?
We do normally, but if we feel that a trainee would thrive better in a different context, we have on occasion negotiated with one of our aligned schools, and if it works for the trainee, they've actually been in 3 different schools.
Because I was just thinking about that. I mean, it's fine to get them to the end of the first placement, and I'd certainly be with you of not giving up, especially if they want to do it. But then I'd have to ask the question: would I be damaging classes and departments if I allowed them back in placement 3? So,
well, if they've got through the end of the first placement and have passed it, then obviously they have to then pass their second placement, and that's kind of out of your control because it's in a different school. If they don't pass that, then you have to think again, maybe they have to do an extra term, or maybe they do have to give up. Maybe that is the point at which they give up. But if they pass the second placement, hopefully some more progress has been made. Nothing is quite predictable when you're dealing with human beings. So our hope is that he will come back, this particular trainee who really wants to be a teacher, and will have made some progress. And we will start again in placement 3 from where he's at, from the point at which he comes back to us, and hopefully he'll get through the year. Can't predict it.
Will you give him the same classes back? Will you give him a different timetable so it's like a fresh start for when he comes back?
We haven't reached the point of talking about that yet, have we? I think our hope is just that he'll survive the second placement and they'll survive him. He has many qualities, and the greatest quality is that he really does want to do this job. You know, he's passionate about teaching. Probably we will give him some of the same classes back, and we'll play to his strengths. Whatever he's learned in the second placement will help us to decide what classes he's got. But I just thought you'd be interested to hear that, because it's not the norm, but we have actually had 2 trainees who fit that particular bracket in this year. We've had 2 who really want to be teachers. We've had others who don't want to be teachers that we're trying to get through in a different way. They can actually teach, they just don't really want to do it, so they're doing it rather badly. But this particular profile was interesting this year, and we were very happy to have been able to pass him. But we were never going to compromise our professionalism to get him through, because there are some people who shouldn't teach.
Were all your subject teachers on board as well? Because sometimes subject teachers want their class back, don't they?
No, they were very supportive, and actually
Absolutely.
that links rather well into your part of this presentation.
It does, yes, absolutely.
Is it working from there, Jennifer?
It is. No, I think, I think I'm all right, or I am. I think I'm all right. Central really to our assessment of trainees, and really central to this whole process that we have, is getting observations right, and not just ourselves, but making sure that our subject mentors are accurate in their lesson observations and are really giving really high quality feedback. And we've had a focus on this from a whole school perspective this year, actually, and it was when Kate came in for our QA visit in September. She happened to mention to me, "Oh Claire, your subject mentor observation reports are really consistent, of a consistent high quality, and very consistent in the manner in which they're written." So we went back and had a little think about this, to think about, well, why is this? And this is what I'm going to speak to you about. So basically, we're going to go back to how we are training our mentors with regards to lessons observations, why or how we think this training has been successfully embedded, and ultimately, how do we think this is impacting on our trainees. So to begin with, the training that we did with our mentors on lesson observations, this was one of the main slides that came from it. The main message was a shift from description in lessons to a more evaluative approach. So instead of just describing events that are happening in the classroom, trying to evaluate the impact that sequence is having on the learning of the students in the classroom. So in terms of the training, I just want to give you a little bit of an insight about how we did this. We obviously put this to staff, and our initial anticipation was that they were going to struggle with, well, what does this mean? Why do we need to do it? What's the point? How do we do it? And these are just a few slides that we had in the training that I thought you may be interested in. And essentially what we said to them was, it was turning what are we seeing in the lesson and combining that with what effect is it having, or what impact is that having. Now, not only were we asking them to do that, but we were asking them to combine it with the grading matrix or the teaching standards to then give more meaningful feedback, which they can then implement. Now, that may sound a little bit waffly, but I'm hoping that I've got a few examples that may put it into context. So One of our colleagues is actually an Ofsted inspector, or one of our colleagues, Vicky Atherton, and really this theory came from her. This is her style of doing it. This is the way that Ofsted do it. So some ideas of some of the phrases that that she would use. For example, instead of something like prompt start, writing on the stand, perhaps, you know, things like by ensuring a prompt start, students were fully engaged from the beginning, and this set a positive tone for the rest of the lesson. That sort of thing.
We brought an example for you of a lesson observation. Should we put those over there or pass them around now?
Oh, that's all right. So just a little bit of inspiration, really.
We thought
an example of a report that is full of these kinds of evaluative type statements rather than description. And one of the interesting things as well that we were trying to put across is not only should the bulk of the observation report be adapting this style, but also when we're setting targets. So instead of increase the pace, perhaps by increasing the pace, you will engage the students and maintain the focus throughout the lesson, so that students can really engage with, well, what is the point of this? If I'm going to do this, what is the point of it? Now, a few other bit highlights, as it were, from the training, a few of the things that we advised was sit back and actually observe. So trying to move away from this frantic, write down everything I see. And I think the immediate feedback from mentors was, oh, but I would miss something. Oh, but this is going to take me a long time to think about these comments that I'm putting in. And we were saying, well, actually, less is more. Does that observation report need to be littered with just description, as it were, and actually more powerful yet fewer statements is going to have more of an impact?
As teachers, you know, it was that I walk around with a pen, and I can't wait to use it. And when I sit down doing lesson observation, you may not be the same. You know, I'm wanting to write things down immediately, so I've had to stop myself from doing that and take a more sit back and focus on the observation rather than the writing.
I mean, I have to admit myself, sometimes I think there's a sheet of paper or something at the side and jot down a few ideas just to remind myself, then turn it into something. And we also encourage an increased use of the grading matrix. I think this was something Kate mentioned, that quite a few of our mentors were within the bulk of the observation report were referring to the actual teaching standards, and that trainees were finding this really useful. Again, really highlighting the importance of analysis of exercise books to inform, you know, are we making progress over time? We felt it's only fair if one subject mentor is doing this, that all subject mentors are doing this to inform their judgment and the feedback they're giving it. And the final thing was, it's all good and well asking mentors to do this, but then if verbal feedback is not given effectively, then what's the point, essentially? So again, another little snippet of the sort of things we were asking. By all means, we can make these slides available to you if you want to have a little look at this. So, as with all CPD, it's all good and well doing it, but we think that we've been really successfully, and with the outcome of the QA visit, of actually putting this into place, and I wanted to share a few ideas with how we think we've done that. Number one was, when we actually delivered the training, we gave mentors an opportunity to actually practice this style of observing. We allowed them an afternoon to look at videos and as part of an inset, and actually have a chance to work together to put these style of evaluative comments together. Again, we encourage the teamwork to continue after that, particularly for new subject mentors. So you know, really trying to encourage our established subject mentors to help newer members of the team with that. As always, we've always done joint observations, as I'm sure everybody here does, but when doing this, we would very much focus on this style of reporting and try and give our mentors confidence and advice about putting this into place when we're doing our joint observations. And this bit was really interesting as well. We involved the trainees in the actual training, and I thought this was really powerful. So the trainees were actually there when the subject mentors were putting this into place and sharing good practice. And I think not only did it increase accountability for mentors thinking, hang on a minute, I better be doing this if this trainees, what should we do in this? But I just thought the trainees really saw things from another perspective, from the other side of the desk, as it were, and hopefully that will have helped them in their observations of their peers. The final thing, with regards to the thing that I think has made the massive difference here, is that our mentors really value this method. They really feel that it has worked, and and I think that is the main thing that has really pushed it forward. Now finally, of course, what's the point of doing it if it's not having a positive impact on trainees? And yes, I do feel it has had a very positive impact on trainees. Well, how do we know? From talking to mentors, from talking to trainees. These are the sort of things that I think that has come out of this shift. So increased appreciation of the impact of their practice. So the things that they are doing in their lesson, they can just engage so much more with, this is the point, this is why I'm doing it. Increased engagement with targets. Sometimes I think it's missed that actually, here are your 3 targets. Next lesson, I want to see this. I want to see progress against these targets. And again, I think there's been more engagement with that. I'm confident that our mentors, when giving verbal feedback, have always been evaluative in their approach. However, this way there is now a permanent record that trainees can come back to, and inevitably they hit that wall. They can come back to this and they can look and say, oh yeah, right, okay, I need to do that because it's going to do this. Increased engagement with the grading matrix, because we've been really pushing that. So I just think from a tactical perspective all round. I think involvement in the training process, again, increased awareness of expectations, and I think just having a bit of an insight to how mentors go about the process of observation was really powerful. Our ultimate goal in all of this is, of course, ensuring that our trainees are provided with a consistent, high quality experience at Loreto Grammar, and I think that has to be central to everything we do, and we really think this has been a positive step in that direction. So I know I'm conscious we've talked
for too long.
Thank you very much, and by all means, if anyone has any comments, feel
Sorry
free.
to run over, Peter.
I was particularly impressed, along with the whole delivery, with that page from Vicky, which said this is how Ofsted would look at a lesson. Because of your input into that, the pupils have done this, that, or because the pupils have done this, that, they have progressed in this, that. I know it's formulaic, and Ofsted will evaluate a lesson in about 1.5 minutes. We know that. But no, I like the idea of the linking between what was seen and what the impact was. I should be looking at that page. Thank you very much.
I'm very struck by the additional support that you gave for planning with the trainee who was at risk of failing. And we would all commend your patience with that person. But very often they can deliver quite well if it's a good lesson, and if it's a bad lesson, you have no chance of delivering it well. But I did see some very good practice in the school where somebody needing some additional support delivered a lesson that had been planned by the subject mentor. And then a week later, the trainee planned a lesson which the subject mentor then delivered. And in that way, you could have a discussion separating how you actually function and organise the space and relate to the pupils, and how the lesson itself is key to a good delivery. And that was very useful with the training that needed extra support. It worked very, very
add
well.
that to the list of measures. Thank you very much.
I think I'm going to start. First of all, Martin, I enjoyed that. Thank you very much, and thank you, Claire. Something about planning. I was once told by a trainee, in fact it was last year, who said to me that he was struggling. And when I asked why, he said, do you know what, I'll be honest with you, the teaching is getting in the way of my planning. And I'd never heard that before. When I unpicked it and he told me he was planning 4 hours for every lesson, I realised exactly what was happening, and that was the help that he needed. But I thought it was a brilliant line. The teaching is actually quite an inconvenience today. I've got several lessons to plan for tomorrow, which I thought was brilliant. Okay, my name is Tony Britton. I'm Deputy Head Teacher at Sale Grammar School. I've got the opportunity to talk to you this afternoon, which I'm grateful for, so thank you, Peter. I'll be honest with you, this is fairly whole school, so Peter's very kindly called this progressive CPD, which I think is a compliment. At this stage, it's fairly It's fairly new, and I would say that in any kind of policy implementation, this is at the embedding stage, and when by no means at any stage which would be considered to be mature, and nor is it fully implemented, nor are we really truly seeing the impact and the kind of fruition of our work. So I don't profess this to be anything other than just our take on CPD. It's idiosyncratic as CPD tends to be, so we think it's going to work for us. It may not for you, and it's what we think is good professional development for our school. It does have a link directly to teacher training, because I will say that subject mentoring is a huge part of any professional development that we have, and I enjoyed your presentation earlier where you talk about that. We place great value at the school on that. And also, in addition to that, the CPD programme that we put in place, a vehicle for professional development, has at the heart of it subject mentor training. And the ITT's entitlement for CPD, because I try to get as many subject teachers across the school delivering on that as possible. I don't think that it's going to be really valuable if it's just me as professional mentor in the school delivering it. So I try and get as many people as possible. I have the privilege of doing the teacher training at the school. It falls within my remit of teacher training and CPD. I'm conscious that's a heck of an introduction, and I've probably rather eroded quite a lot of my time, but I will do my best to zip through this. In planning this, I couldn't get past the idea that it would be easy for me to, or rather easier for me to, extol the virtues of what we've put in place by rather just telling you a story, and I found it difficult to plan it any other way. My start 3 years ago was this. I really wanted to just get the colleagues' heads around the idea that I had that the best CPD was one that was driven from our internal development and evaluation, and less to do with drivers externally. So I did this slide for colleagues, and I said that it was fairly obvious we lived in and taught in a world where there's a significant curriculum change, and whilst Ofqual and DFE are pushing change, and this year, right now we're in the heart of it, aren't we? Curriculum change. I felt that that was a driver that was outside of our control. I didn't think that was the best CPD. I said self-evaluation was the best way of doing this, and the self-evaluation and knowing what we needed to do to improve was at the heart of it. Then it led to, I think, a simple conclusion that the best CPD is what we deliver to ourselves, and by that I mean using the expertise in the school and with our partner schools. This isn't too complicated, but it's a slide I've used a number of times over the last couple of years, and it's to do with how we link self-evaluation to self-improvement. We tackle self-evaluation from a teacher level, a faculty level, as an organisational level, as everyone does. I demand every year that our teachers embark on a review of their teacher standards. I'll be honest with you, I don't make it any more complicated than that, and we don't look at advanced skill teaching or anything else, but just the teacher standards. And through Blue Sky software, where they rate things, and the narrative that goes with that, and the evidence that I demand colleagues upload, I get a very clear picture of where people see their own personal development. That feeds into something which is fairly bespoke to us, which is a department tracker. Ignoring the nomenclature that I've used there, it's essentially a CEF. And we ask our heads of faculty to embark on this, which is a very clear self-review with their SLT link. There are obviously areas that support that work scrutiny, and you can see the others there. That then feeds into the organisation school development plan, and then subsequently we can then target planning in advance. And I think there's probably this slide, which doesn't sound too revolutionary, becomes a little bit more meaning when I add times. We do all of our self-evaluation before May, and I get the school development plan in place in June, and we implement it fully in July. And now I know that there's a caveat to that, and that is that your performance management cannot possibly be illegally and contractually completed until October because you're waiting on exam results, etc. Yet I understand all of that, but we still do it, and we do everything with the exception of ticking the box. We've just started our self-evaluation for the year right now. The feeling behind that for me was always that I couldn't quite understand why I never could, going back to when I first taught, that I set my targets for the year in January when the year started in September. And that was the worst case scenario. In most cases, on average, I kind of got them finalised about November. And I still couldn't get my head around that. I mean, no Premiership manager is ever going to start thinking about where they're going to finish that season, having played 15 games already. So, sorry for the crude analogy. So that's what we do. We've started the CEF right now with our faculties. We hone that every year, the criteria we use for the examination of faculties, and it leads up to our targeting. And then we work backwards. So we have a school development plan which is built on evaluation. There's faculty action plans pick up what the development plan themes are, and then individually the 1, 2, 3 targets have to work towards achieving the faculty goals. You'll see that, and this is kind of the heart of the philosophy. So if that's the mechanics, this is the philosophy, and I've put this all over the school. But if you've ever visited the school, you'll see it on absolutely everything. It's everything I do in my emails, the lot. You'll see that. And rather unashamedly I use it, and it's a very simple mantra that ties in with teacher training, and it is this: that no matter how long you've been teaching, you can always improve. And I won't have a member of staff telling me that they've done everything and X number of years in they're as good as they're ever going to be, because I don't firmly believe that that's the case. So I ask everyone to be teacher learners within the school and get better. Now I hang the whole thing on this, which is what we call our Excellence in Teaching programme. I want a vehicle or a framework for our colleagues to buy into professional development. I won't labour it too much, safe to say that there's 3 strands to it. There's a research project for Module 1, or Strand 1, some collaborative and partnership work within Strand 2, and you'll see it sitting at the top of it, which I think is one of the most important strands, is subject mentoring. And then Strand 3, they combine into quality, which is to do with sharing best practice. I ask colleagues to support this by through their own professional development with their performance management. So people in their performance management are now using these terms, that their CPD target is going to be to undertake a certain module within this. Where does that fit with the teacher training? Well, actually, do you know what I was saying to Kate earlier? In an ideal world, placement 2, placement 3, I'd hope that some of our teacher trainees, because they fully work with this in our school, would actually maybe put together a postcard and share best practice, and that comes in as one of the modules, and I've got postcards available that we put together, but they maybe won't embark on this. This is the entire year project, 18-month project. Ultimately, if they get this complete and they have to do 1, 2 and 3 in that order, they get accredited as excellent teachers in our school, or they will do. I mentioned the CPD programme before, and because we plan early, I get the CPD programme out in June, July for the next year. So this was the booklet we issued in June of last year and July, and everything was set in stone. You can't read the slide prior to that, but that's what it looks like page by page. And within that there's the Excellence in Teaching programme again. But then because we have that kind of framework, I'm getting buy-in, and I'm finding that within this there's just September. That was all the CPD sessions that were delivered in September, and it's been done by members of staff across the school. So I'm not just got the same names again and again and again. It's not me, it's not my assistant head teachers, it's various people who want to tick off these modules.
How does that, when do they deliver them?
They deliver them after school. Yeah, after school.
And do your teachers, sorry to interrupt you.
No, Martine, you're fine, go ahead.
Do they voluntarily attend?
Yeah.
Are they just very keen, or is there some kind of
no, there's no incentive. We don't have any twilights. We have our teacher training days during the course of the year. No twilights. We put these on as professional development sessions. So I've had 25 after-school CPD sessions delivered this academic year alone. Some of those are ITT CPD sessions, but there's a significant amount that aren't, that are delivered by members of staff who want to try and develop themselves by ticking off certain elements of that framework. We have teacher learning days every year. We managed to not fortuitously, we paid him an awful lot of money, but Jeff Petty came and delivered for us last year, because he pushes supportive experimentation and research projects, which is at the heart of our work. He did a great session with staff. I've had 22 research projects delivered as workshops over the last 3 teacher training days. And this whole teacher learning thing, I'll be honest with you, I'm relentless with it. We have newsletters every term. We have postcards which we issue that I've got a whole bunch of. So without fail, every month we have a pedagogical postcard which are delivered by other members of staff, not just me. If I did it every month, then there's no impact. It's just me. But these are done by all members of staff. And on average, we have 12 trainees in an academic year and we have again, I like to refresh and have new mentors. So we're really pushing this as a programme. There's one of the postcards, and there's plenty available. This is this month's, which is about testing positively. There's David Didow, for those of you who recommend. Oh, that's something else. I've bought loads of books for the library, teaching and learning. We've got books everywhere for that purpose. What do I want to happen with this? Well, ultimately, I want excellent teachers to be accredited in the school. Where do I see them working? We have faculty reviews during the course of the year from our self-review. I want them to be part of that. When we have interviews, I don't see why it should be assistant head teachers and deputies who do the interviews. I think it should be our excellent teachers who are doing the observations of lessons and telling me, because I've got to trust them, and I should trust them. And we involve them in staff induction now, and I'm starting to involve them in coaching of RQTs and new members of staff. That's the environment we've got. Now, you'll ask me what's the impact of it right now. I'll tell you, we're kind of at 2.5 years into it. Have I measured the impact on quality of teaching and learning? I have, but and obviously I could talk about external results, but I still think we're embedding it. I think what I've got right now is a philosophical change, a cultural change. It's all ephemeral and woolly, that, I know. But it's a nice feeling, and we've got buy-in because people are taking part, and I've got a very full programme. So if you ask me in a couple of years, I'll tell you whether or not quality of teaching and learning is really improved, but that's the aim. I'm sorry I've taken up probably over more my time.
Any questions for Tony?
So the only bit which I didn't get is you're saying accredited and certified.
Yeah.
Is this just within the school, or is it linked to an external university?
I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
I'm Craig Walsh.
Craig, that's a great question. Do you know what? If I have a dream. I tell you where I'd like.
The guys had that too.
I tell you where I'd like it to go. If only there was a university that would perhaps accredit us or maybe affiliate this for masters. That's the aim, really. I'd like to.
The only reason why I ask is I used to work at the Sacred Heart in London, and they were linked up with, I think, Queen Mary's, and we were teacher training school, so we did something similar to that. That's why I was asking.
We haven't got that far, but that's ultimately, in the conversations with the head, that's where I want to take it. I'd like it, some areas of these to be accredited with masters at points, and now I know that's difficult. There's a quality assurance issue there. I get all of that, but that's where I'd like it to go ultimately, because at the minute, you're right, it is just internal, and it's a thing. I mean, I'll be honest with you, we give them a nice certificate and it looks lovely, and we make a fuss and we applaud, and they get a bottle of wine and chocolates, and that's all great. And I'd like to think that people will do that, but ultimately, there needs to be perhaps something sharper, and that's where I want to go with it. It's a great question.
Are you already linking with partner schools, or is that part of your dream as well?
We are running our first external training session this year, where we are with Design Technology, where we're going to be inviting schools from the Northwest to come and see what they're doing. So yes, we are hoping to. We're not a teaching school, and we've missed the boat in Trafford. We can't do that. I know there are colleagues from a teaching school to my left, and there's Ashton and Mersey here today. I don't know hello. So we can't do that, but we can do our best to be involved. We are involved in the Maths Hub. Ashton and Mersey, I worked a lot with Joe Kenny, so I know, we have links, but yeah, we do want to take that further as well. Hello, Claire.
Sorry, what do you think the motivating factor's been? Is it the final outcome there? It's just you seem like you've got such engagement with this after school CPD. Do you think there's something specific?
It's wine, isn't it?
That's the wine at the end of it.
Is it the excellent teacher status? I'm really interested to know what it is.
I know for a fact that there's 2 members of staff who are just passionate about delivering, but I know in one particular case it's going to lead to her unfortunately leaving the school, I would have thought, because I know exactly where she wants to go in terms of a career, so I know why she's doing this. So yes, I think it's career development, and I get that's fine. I'm sure there's not a person sat here that hasn't undertaken courses with the intention of developing their career, so that's at the heart of it, but we're fortunate in Sale that we've actually got low staff turnover, so at the minute I've got people doing it because they want to. And it's a good feeling at the minute, and it's getting better. That's not a very clear answer, that.
And in terms of staff who are attending, so the motivation of staff attending the after-school CPD, do you think there's anything particular that...
Depends what it is.
Right.
It depends what it is. Yeah, we had a session that was delivered on Memory Light Classroom in dyslexia, and the take-up on that was enormous, and I didn't think it particularly would be. And we were full, and then equally one I thought would be really particularly popular wasn't. But so we've never cancelled a session yet. So the person that's prepared, so if 2 people turn up, they deliver, but on average we get 6 to 8, 10 people, but sometimes more than that, 15, 20.
There are some academy chains where the CPD sessions if that compulsory for teachers that might not be cutting the mustard. I'm assuming that's not the case in your school. This is just for excelling.
No, we have members of staff who work in an improving teacher programme. Absolutely, we do, and it is compulsory for them to attend. Craig, you're right. That's something that we have to put them through. So I would demand that I see them there. Absolutely, and no, we do have that issue. In fact, we have right now improving teachers who are on a programme. Kate.
I think it's also fair to say that there are teachers who want to make that investment in the school that they're in and in their own community. I mean, in my role on the school liaison team, I've been into lots and lots of schools, and it struck me in placement 1 where the professional mentor said, we're looking for trainees from, well, they're talking about Manchester, of course, in this context, but local trainees who are going to stay with us and then want to invest in the community. And they're communities which are deprived communities in the Salford area particularly. And I think no matter where you are, if you've got staff who want to commit and to improve the school that they're in and the community that they live in, then they will sign up.
Well, I hope so. I will say one of the, if I might for just a minute, I will say one of the things that I think made a big difference is the performance management and the target setting and moving it and shifting it completely, because that was fundamental. I will say that was huge. In fact, we had a seismic shift in take up in CPD and engagement with performance management, because rightly and wrongly, I think it needs to be done when we do it, because otherwise, how can you start an academic year if you're still evaluating the other one? So we get it all out of the way. We have a CPD day. One of our training days we devote in July to performance management. We have a full day and there's no interruptions. That's what people do. We start in the hall with quick announcements and quick guidance for people who need it. Then off they go. Everyone reviews that day, everyone sets targets that day, but they've already done their evaluation. So they arrive at the meetings with evidence ready to go.
So I'm Jill from Ashton-on-Mersey School. As Tony mentioned, we're a SCIT. So this might be a little bit specific to our school, but obviously Standard 8 is Standard 8 whatever course they're on, whatever institution they're with. The reason that we've chosen to focus on Standard 8 a little bit in our school this year is a couple of reasons. Firstly, helping the trainees to see the bigger picture, so life outside the classroom. So we found that because we are a SCIT and we have a lot of trainees, so at the moment we've got 22, but we can have more than that at any one time. They have their own staff room, they've got their own common room, and they've got their own IT suite, which is brilliant for them in some ways, but in other ways we've found that it's been a bit of an issue because it's easy for them to hide and it's easy for them to do the things they're really meant to do, so their planning and their delivery, but in between that they were kind of disappearing if they wanted to. Some of them weren't, obviously some of them were really proactive, but others were spending their break times, lunch times, after school in their own little common room having a great time with all the other trainees, and then coming to the end of their placement and realising they didn't have very much evidence for fulfilling their wider professional responsibilities because they'd avoided that, and they'd managed to avoid it because there's so many of them to manage that they were getting away with it in a way. So not only that, but also the ones that were really involved were struggling of how do I evidence that. So that's what we've really helped them with this year, giving them loads of ideas of how to evidence it, and hopefully that's what I'm going to share with you today as well. So just a quick reminder, I'm sure we all know exactly what Standard 8 is, but divided into the substandards. So making a positive contribution to the wider life of school, that was the key one that we looked at really. Developing professional relationships, deploying support staff, which is obviously more lesson based, taking responsibility for improving teaching through appropriate professional development, and communicating effectively with parents, so parents' evenings, progress evenings, etc. So we decided this year to set out our expectations, sorry that's a little bit small, as a school to help them to evidence this standard. So to be really specific with them about what we expected of them above and beyond what they were doing already. So obviously attendance at staff briefing, we have a briefing every Monday morning. That was something that, again, they were sat in their own little staff room or common room while we were all in staff briefing, and it dawned upon us that actually they should be in there with us as well, finding out what we've got planned ahead for the week, etc. And all staff meetings, unless notified otherwise, because obviously they're not all relevant, but most of them are. Attending progress evenings which are relevant to the trainees, if they teach classes in that year group, being on time for form and taking a lead in form time activities, which might sound like it's a given that you would just do that, but again we were finding that because they have their own little building, I know this is not relevant to all schools, but they weren't arriving at form time on time. They were waiting for the bell to go and then starting to make their way over, in the sense that the pupils do, rather than that they should be there first and taking a lead. Assisting their form tutor with break duty, and we've asked them this year to do 2 extracurricular clubs at lunchtime and 2 after school, and that can include meeting times as well, but we've suggested revision sessions, interventions within their subject area, but also looking at getting involved in other subjects as well. So my specialist area is PE, so getting them involved in the PE department, but from whatever subject they were from, so just asking them to help out, getting them their face seen around school a little bit more, and then corridor presence. This is something that all the staff at our school do. Between every lesson we all stand out on the corridor because we're a very crowded school. We've got way more pupils than we should have for the size of the building, but asking them to do that as well, and that's again something that we didn't really even think about previously, but obviously the more staff we've got out on the corridors, the safer the school is and the calmer that the school environment is. But it's about them getting fully involved in what's happening outside of the classroom as well, and obviously modelling the behaviour that we expect of the pupils. So we would never walk down the corridor with our coats on because the pupils aren't allowed to, and just asking our trainees to model that behaviour as well. So I've shared this as professional mentor with all of our trainees, and I keep a track of where they all are at break times, lunch times, after school, making sure that they really are getting involved in the wider life of school. So in terms of evidence in that's again where some of them said, okay, great, I've done all my break duties, my lunch duties, etc., but I don't know how to prove that I've done that. So we produced a list, and there's loads and loads of bullet points. I'm not obviously expecting you to go through this now, but I'll pass these around so you can have a look. There isn't actually enough for one each because I didn't realise there was going to be as many of you as there are, but I'll make sure that you can certainly see one, and then if you wanted a copy of it, obviously I can send you one. But it just breaks down. I'll just pass them round. As I say, you won't be able to have one each.
Can you make a few more copies?
Yeah, you can do if that's okay. Thank you. So it's just broken down into the substandards, and then bullet points for each one about ideas. I'll just give you one to see for now. I'll just have a little look. Just pass these that way. Thanks. So just loads of ideas, bullet points for each of the substandards, so A, B, C, D and E, and just ideas of what they could use for each of the standards. So obviously you can just have a look through that in your own time. We only asked them to show us 2 pieces of evidence for each substandard. I'm sure that's the same in most schools, but they've got loads of ideas to choose from if they can have a look through that sheet. There are spares here if anybody. Thank you. Anybody else? Additionally to that, we also spoke to them about evidence packages and what makes a good piece of evidence, because obviously it's easy for them to collect loads and loads of evidence, but what we've talked to them about this year is it's about quality, not quantity. So having some really, really good pieces of evidence and focusing on a package of evidence, which I'll speak to you a bit more about in a second. So evidencing across the substandards, making sure that they're fully achieving the standard overall, making sure they've got a range of evidence from different key stages, not massively relevant in terms of standard 8, but still to think about looking at key stage 5 as well if they've got that opportunity, etc. Evidence that matches their expected outcome grades, so that is what this is about, that I'll also hand out for you to have a look at as well. So we've broken each substandard down into beginning, developing, good and outstanding, and making sure that that mirrors the type of evidence that they're putting into their folder. So for example, if they are saying that they've achieved outstanding in substandard A, does their evidence reflect the wording that is in that box there? So it's just about matching up and making sure, again, it's about consistency. So it's not just subjective that we think that they're outstanding, but if they've hit and they've got the key words in that box, then we can say, yeah, they are outstanding, and their evidence proves that as well. So again, I'll pass those round so you can have a look at those in a moment. And finally, just in terms of the evidence package, which I mentioned before, so we've talked to them about not just putting one piece of evidence in, but making it into a package so it really makes sense and so it's a good quality piece of evidence. So for example, if they've said we've helped out at an extracurricular club, so we helped out at trampolining club, then their piece of evidence could be the extracurricular timetable, but it could also be a letter to the parents that they've sent out, some photographs from the activity, feedback from the teacher that they were with, or maybe even getting the pupils to evaluate that activity. So all of that together making one package to then use as their piece of evidence for, say, standard 8A or whatever it is. I've brought some examples, but again, there aren't enough for everybody to have a look, and I don't really want to take them apart because I've taken them off some trainees, but if you wanted to have a look, these are some examples of outstanding, well, I've just taken the section 8 bit out of their folders, but these are outstanding pieces of evidence for standard 8, and it's broken down into each of the sub-standards as well, and some good examples of how they've used this model to put together an evidence package. We asked them to put a package per plastic wallet so that it's easier to look at as well. So there's a couple of examples there, and we also asked them to write a little story about how each one matches up to each substandard as well. So I'll have those at the end of the session if you want to have a look at any of
Being
these.
cheeky, is that a pro forma or any chance you can email it? Because I write this idea.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I can do that. So again, I'll pass these round because these are, as I say, broken down at the beginning, developing good and outstanding, so we can look at the keywords if you want to have a look at those as well.
My name's Sue Goldrick and I work at the University of Manchester. Please just asked me to come in and give a 5-minute talk on some of the work that I do around the Coalition of Research Schools, just to let you know what we're doing. The Coalition of Research Schools is a group of schools who work in partnership with us at the University of Manchester, and it's basically schools from across Greater Manchester, primary and secondary. And basically we work together the idea is to use research to improve schools from within, and that's kind of quite key, that it is about improving from within. So it's what you see as important in your school that you want to develop, and it's about teachers making choices and finding about and doing research into their own practice, not being researched on, in order to improve the things they want to improve. And basically it's called research, isn't that we use research tools, gathering evidence and engaging with evidence to explore what's going on in our schools. And this is kind of a basic leaflet which explains what we do. But key to it, as we say equity, because we're not really interested, it's about looking at things that you're concerned about, or things around where you feel children are struggling in one way. It's not about, because sometimes people get the wrong idea and they say it's about validating and trying to show what they're doing is great and proving that things work, and it's not about that really, because really what happens then is people cherry pick what they want, and then it isn't really valid or doesn't come across as credible research. So it is about looking at research around children who maybe concern you in some way, or things around school that concern you in some way that you want to investigate further. And it's a very simple process. Basically we ask, it's about collaboration. Key to it is about collaboration. It's about teachers coming together from across schools, a group of teachers with researchers, and basically talking about their practice, talking about their perspectives on practice, talking about their evidence they've gathered, and about articulating their practice, which often teachers don't get the chance to do in an environment that is safe, and sort of learning from each other. And the process is quite straightforward in that they come together, they identify a focus in their school that's meaningful to them, that's really important, that they want to focus on. They identify gaps in their knowledge about that focus. So we all have hunches about what we think is going on in school or what's happening in groups of students, but it's kind of actually identifying gaps where actually we don't really know what's going on, and then gathering evidence, that's the research bit, to explore that gap further, and then to use that evidence to think about, well, how do we move forward from here. So it's kind of just that cycle of research, but getting teachers to talk about it and doing it in a systematic way. So for example, you might use some kind of tool that you use to, where a group of say 5, 6, 7 teachers go around classrooms or in their own classroom and look at what's going on in more depth. So it's kind of like slowing things down a bit, just slowing down and looking and exploring and thinking and having a reflective space to talk about it, and then sharing it with each other. So that's kind of how it works, and how we run it is that we run 6 workshops throughout the year where schools come together. They meet here in the evenings from about 3:15 to 5:30, 6 times during the year, and then we have a conference at the end of the year. At those 6 sessions, we do some input on how to gather evidence, how to engage with it, but key to it is about the teachers sharing with each other. And it is then the key though is that they go back into their schools and work in their schools to carry out the research. And we come into your schools to support you with that as well. So that's just to give you a bit of outline of how it works. And what we do, so just briefly, Peter asked me to bring you these in. We do some posters, so I'll just give you one. The teachers do these. I have to say, we used to do write documents, which are also quite good, but I think the teachers seem to really like doing posters where they create these. I came up with this idea because I don't know if you do PhDs, lots of students do a poster presentation. It's part of doing a PhD, and they're around all the corridors in the university. So I thought, well, rather than writing a 3-page document, which often then goes in a cupboard and is never looked at again, why not do a poster? And last year, I thought it was a lot of work for the teachers, whereas I'd supported them with the paper. I said, let's not do this. And they said, no, we want to do this. So they obviously quite like doing it. And they create these posters, and we kind of produce them here at the university. What this means, and then they can take this back to their schools and put them up where they want to, use them at schools as well. And basically, we kind of work on these with them, and they decide how they want to do them. And if you want to look at any of these, you can too. This one is, I don't know if you know Albion Academy in Salford, which is a school with high-level children with on free school meals. It's a high-level disadvantage, and they were looking at over 2 years. So it's quite small. They were looking at, first of all, what was preventing children from developing their literacy, but looking at issues around barriers to learning, related to social issues, basically. And they explored that through working with the children and the parents. And then that took them the whole first year. And then they kind of gave those children to improve their kind of their social capital. They took them on trips to places where they wouldn't have normally gone to, and got them to use those to write about things. But the first part was just exploring what was going on for those children and interviewing them and looking at their work and how they wrote. I mean, in the second year, they then looked at what teaching strategies were going in the school to support them. But that's kind of just one project that they wrote about. The other one here, this is the primary one, which I've just brought it because it's quite interesting, I think. I'll put that here. This one. Again, this is primary, where they were looking at, again, it's a school with high levels of children with, lost children with English as an additional language, and they were looking at, what we're looking at here, they wanted to improve, again, literacy, looking at language and writing, but through oracy and through performance and through spoken language and using that. And again, they kind of did lots of observation of what was going on in the classroom. They looked at the children's work, but it's the way they did it in a systematic way. So the group of teachers devised an observation tool, if you like, to go around and look at the children and explore what's going on. So they had something to talk about, which was very specific and very clear to them all, and it was credible as well across the school. And then they looked at how they then developed the speaking for those children and monitored that as well. I could rabbit on for ages about this, because we've done this has been going now for 10 years. There's lots of examples, but I mean, I could just put this on your tables if you just want to have a chat among yourselves or ask me any questions you like.
All right, so we'll put them at the back with the other stuff, and I'll bring them back to you eventually. If anybody wants to say, otherwise, I'm sure you've got Sue's contact details on the leaflet. Yep. Is that correct?
So just email me if you've got any queries.
You'd like to contact her, I'm sure she will be delighted to Actually, the 6th.
Right.
I'll let you
All right, okay.
stick one or two there. Right, just 2 more sessions to go. One, unfortunately, is me. I'll be quite quick, really. I did have some figures and statistics that I had gleaned from you and the trainees recently, so I've just summarised them. I've just highlighted a few green points here. First of all, the trainees' evaluation to the schools last term. Well, it was absolutely fantastic, and massive congratulations to the schools. The trainees, obviously we're doing this again at the end of Teaching Practice 2, but at the end of Teaching Practice 1, thought the schools were fabulous, and we agree, we on the school liaison team who go visiting the schools, thought they were fabulous, and we continue to marvel at the input. I mean, the stuff you've seen today, and the stuff you'll get by email, from me, in more detail, the input you've had today, and one or two other things, not like the guy who's left, Mark, about his RQT programme. Absolutely fantastic. 70% of the trainees graded their teaching practice as outstanding. 24% graded their teaching experience as good. So the mathematicians amongst you will realise that there's only like 5%, which is something like half of 6 or 7 trainees out of the 160 or so that we've got thought their teaching practice placement was only satisfactory. Now, bear in mind that people who aren't doing particularly well themselves as trainees sometimes pass the blame for their inadequacies onto lack of support. I think that's absolutely fabulous. And if you look at the individual questions that they answer, and they're all in the back of your handbook, there was a couple of areas where schools sometimes are not in a position to be able to support certain areas, like working with trainees, evaluate what the support was for working with teaching assistants. Well, if your school hasn't got teaching assistants, well, they can't very well evaluate it as being very high. And the other one, which I think most schools, even grammar schools, have got SEN departments, even though there might only be half a dozen kids in it with specific learning difficulties. God love them, somebody might be blind, but still in a grammar school. They were the only 2 areas that I was sort of raising my eyebrows over when I saw them. So where you can, and I know you all can't, please make sure the trainees have got opportunities to work with teaching assistants and to work in the special needs department. That's why I try and encourage you during normal teaching practice. Yes, give them the 8 to 10 hours, thanks Sue, with their subject, but also try and get them 1 or 2 hours in the special needs department or in the PHSE department, out in the school, which helps cover standard 8 as well. So that was the trainees' evaluations of the schools. We also ask at the end of each term the schools, that's you as professional mentors and the subject mentors, to do an evaluation of us. Well, thank you very much. You seem to think we're doing a good job. 100% of the replies, which was about 60% of those who were asked, which in itself is quite good, busy people, 100% of you reckoned our professional mentors thought our support for schools was good or very good. 80% thought it was outstanding, and 20% thought it was good. No grade 3, so great, fantastic. Subject mentors also felt 100% of the subject mentors in your schools thought the university support for them was good or very good. 50% outstanding and 50% good. Okay. And then last thing I'd like to say is looking at the future. As you may have heard a few times, we're likely to be Ofsteded after Easter, which will involve Ofsted coming into your school, some of your schools, probably 15 of your schools altogether, for 1 day per school, something like that. That seems to be the typical pattern. Now, I've looked through the Ofsted report from Staffordshire, MMU, Chester and Edge Hill, and it's amazing. I don't know whether you look at all the school reports on Ofsted, but it's amazing how different lead inspectors seem to have different bees in their bonnets, and they still have bees in their bonnets. You get a missive from the NCTL one day saying, how you do your marking is entirely up to your school. As long as people are following school policy, that's fine. The next day you hear about a school that got absolute slated because the marking policy of that school didn't fit in with what the Ofsted inspector thought the marking policy ought to be. But anyway, despite all that, I found 3 or 4 particularly consistent points that were being made. I'd just like to mention them to you now. So, consistency and quality of mentor training, the mentor's judgment and assessment of the trainees across the whole school, how the different subjects were similar to each other within the school, were important factors in the Ofsted report. It's also applied to the university as well. So we have systems in the university whereby different tutors from different departments will do joint observations themselves in each other's subject. So an English tutor will go and watch a maths lesson with a maths tutor. So we try to develop consistency across the subjects here. I'm sure we do a lot more than that, but that's just to sort of summarise that. So it's also important that trainees get training in the use of marking and assessment, and we've seen that, marking, assessment and feedback, so they can give feedback on the different groups of kids they work with to help with their future planning, the trainees' future planning of the lessons, to take account of what they found in the last lesson or in the last week. Just common sense, something you will do on the fly. You will do every day, every lesson virtually. You will know where your kids are up to, but trainees need training. It doesn't happen automatically, and they've got to realise that there are different groups of kids in the class, even in a grammar school. There are some kids who will need a bit more challenge because they're really, really bright, and some kids will need a bit more support. And the trainee has to be aware that that is the situation and take account of it when they come to their next lesson. So that's number 2. There's only 4. Trainees are encouraged to reflect on their lessons and focus on the impact that their lessons are making. We've had a lot of that today. So the trainees are going to focus on the impact of their lessons on the learning and progress of the pupils. And then SEN, EAL, PHSE involvement where possible. One lead inspector spent the whole report basically talking about PHSE. I wonder why they get their mortgage paid. And others barely mention it, but it did creep in, even in those that didn't really mention it that much. So they're the sort of the 3 major points I'd like to mention. And now we've got one more couple session from Andy. We've got 10 minutes to do it.
Yeah, there'll be no more than that, I promise you. Can I give you all a bookmark? We do like bookmarks. This is a slightly different bookmark. It's not so exciting as the standards bookmark. I don't think I've met everybody, but it's lovely to see you all. I'm Andy Howes, I'm the Director of the Secondary Partnership. So we obviously, mentor training is essential to us and as well as to you, and it's been lovely. I wasn't able to be here the whole session. As you know, your trainees are with us. Those of you who've got trainees in placement too, so I've just been with the science group. But the sessions I was here for, thinking about the way that you support subject mentors has been a strong feature, and I think it's wonderful the way the role of the professional mentor in the time I've been involved in this has developed in terms of how that is such a kind of key part of the role. How many of you are familiar with the national standards for school-based initial teacher training of mentors? How many of you are already familiar with this? Can I just see a sort of indication? Okay, 1 or 2 people. We were in the same position at the beginning of this year, and they are relatively new. They are not mandatory, but they are certainly strongly supported by DFE and as guidance, as good guidance. And it's just worth having a look at them. And so what we're wanting to do is to distribute these to subject mentors. I'll go and get or Pete, I don't know whether you might go and get a stack of them from Lucy, such that anybody who wants to could take enough to take for your mentors today. Would that be?
And the trainees not taking them back with them when they leave today?
No, they're not. So I think that might be a good way to do the first step of this. So if you look through it, there's 4 standards. One is on the back. There's one on personal qualities. There's one on teaching. There's one on professionalism, and one on self-development and partnership working. And in a sense, there's nothing too surprising in here, but I think it's quite helpful to have some of these things written down, which some of them we might not ever actually talk about otherwise, and some of those in the context of personal qualities for mentoring I think are really interesting. For example, I'd just like to invite you to talk for a couple of moments with the people next to you about any that surprise you, that you might not have expected to see in there, or that you're really glad are in there in some way or other. Just have a little look down the list and see which ones you're struck by.
Trainees we have where they lack confidence or experience to do things. I wouldn't do it on their own. Again in the future.
Well, it's for the boys mandated to do it by the group.
See,
Definitely vetted by the
we've paid a lot of money for outsourcing.
I'm sure they have. Could have gone to bloody cause like a school. Anybody got comments that you want to share about these in particular? Anything that strikes you that you think is worth raising or questioning or thinking about?
What's robust?
Robust? Where are you looking at, Martin? Sorry, I'm...
It's at the bottom, standard 2, bottom of interpret robust educational research. I'm at the end, standard 4, engaging with robust.
Okay, I think that's having a fair dig and a completely justifiable one at the fact that there's a lot of educational research which is not very good. Yeah, I think that's what they're saying. Yeah, so in other words, not encouraging people to be undiscriminating in terms of the research that they might suggest to trainees or for themselves. Yeah.
We thought that was one where actually I would have thought more the university would be guiding them in that sense.
Absolutely, that is certainly. Remember, this is for the whole of ITE, and so that function might look as though it's differently distributed if you're in a SCIT or if you're in a place which is QTS only, but nevertheless. Research ought to come into the training of the teacher in some way, and also I suppose it also gives a push towards the idea that we are a research-informed profession, and that it's for everybody to be involved in some way.
If the trainees are doing assignments during the course of the year, it makes sense that there's a discussion with the mentors.
Yeah.
Are you doing this?
Yeah.
You know, do you want to plan a series of lessons which bring it in? So it's a logical conversation at some level.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's great if a mentor can engage in that kind of work with a trainee. It's not something we always expect in every subject, but it's as we've talked about, mentors have different strengths. Whatever we talk about consistency, mentors certainly have different strengths, and some bring that strongly to it, and that's something to encourage and try to share across between mentors as well. Anything else that strikes you from this at all?
Andy, I'm not exactly answering your question, but I just shared with my two neighbours. I'm just impressed at how many of these things we've touched on just this afternoon.
Yes, as I was looking down at thinking, absolutely, that's right. Yeah.
So that's very heartening, isn't it?
That's good, isn't it?
To be honest, when you look at our handbooks, both mine and the departments, nearly, I would say 90% of what they are expecting us to be doing, expecting you to be doing, is actually being done anyway.
Yeah.
Not quite set out in this fashion as 4 separate standards.
Yeah. I think we don't intend to operationalise this as a pass or fail or anything like that, or a grading of mentors, and I sincerely hope this is not the national direction. I don't think it is. I think it's a kind of yardstick, a sort of basic set of ideas to be thinking around, and probably quite helpful for some discussions with some mentors around, well, think about how you might come across in some circumstances, look at the list of things on standard 1, and you know, those kind of conversations can be useful sometimes with some mentors.
And you know, Andy, if somebody in school is using becoming a mentor as part of their performance management, then this is really handy in giving them the language to use
that's a really
and
good
to say
point.
that they've met these standards, isn't it? Because that's a lot of staff have done that, haven't they?
Yeah, very good point. And for celebrating things as well. It doesn't hurt that something that you've been doing well is there. Look, it's fantastic that you were doing that. You just mentioned, I heard over here in the conversation about resolving in-school issues on the trainees' behalf and getting into a discussion of what that might mean and whether it was the right kind of emphasis. But you know, the idea that yes, there's a role to play in helping the trainee to sort out problems is really helpful. Right, that's the first part of what I wanted to do. The second part is shorter, and it's only to point you towards this, and just again to question how many people are familiar with that page. Okay, right. So that is the login page for our, what we're now calling, it's on the back of here, mentor resource site. So on the back you've got a little section in the middle there, which I wish I'd printed in a different font. I actually didn't realise this was going to be printed in colour, otherwise it would have been it would looked a lot better. Mentor resource site there is the place where we keep all the documents and resources that might facilitate subject mentors' work, and indeed yours. So the whole bank of resources that Pete has gathered from yourselves and other schools in the past is in there. You log in through the password and the username and password that's there, PGC Secondary, and this password is secondary. And that, it's a really helpful resource. It's pretty well organised. It's in a hierarchy. Okay, it's not the most attractive looking website. I'll do it very quickly just to show you. But it is all there, and it's all relevant and mostly up to date. So if you haven't used it and you are looking for things that you think, why hasn't the University of Manchester sent me anything like that, then it's got to be in all caps. Start that again. PGC secondary. Then it is quite a helpful thing.
As well.
Yeah, everything is in uppercase. Yeah. Please read this message. No, go away. Oh, I have to agree. Of course I do. I don't want to read the message, so I'm declining. But don't ask him if you want to read it, is it? So, partnership handbook, quality assurance issues, risk protocols for schools in challenging circumstances and others. A section on the workload reviews that we've talked about this afternoon. ITT reports that Lisa talked about, I think. Section on safeguarding. Yeah, okay. And then we've got specific to secondary handbooks, professional mentor information. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there, and it's all there, and it's fairly systematic, and I definitely encourage you to have a look at it. I'll go back if I can, because underneath that is something else which I think is really useful and which we would encourage you to.
I'm probably misreading this front page because I know the one you're going back to.
Yeah.
Is that 35 quid to the person that's doing the training, or do you have to pay 35 quid to do the training?
No, surprisingly, it's £35 for the person who has done the training.
Right. Okay.
So what we decided was that if somebody cannot get to the face-to-face mentor training, which is obviously the best way that we would encourage because you meet other mentors and it's a better process in many, many senses from our point of view. It's a professional development process. You're getting to meet people from other schools and colleges and so on. But if that's not possible and somebody does need training, then we would encourage you to encourage them to do that, the online mentor training, which involves looking at some videos that we produced along with yourselves. Denise from Wearmouth, thank you, who's now retired, features in one of them, and it's fairly straightforward. It shows the basics of the program in the same way that we do when we do the generic mentor training here. And it's available, and then when you fill in the answer to a set of questions at the end and send that here, we will then pay £35 to that person for doing it. And several people have done that already, and I imagine that more people will start to do it as we start to publicise it more. So there's a beautiful introduction by me on the purpose of the partnership, which is worth 7 minutes of anybody's time, I'm sure. And you end up with 35 quid as a result of it. So do think about whether there's anybody that might benefit from doing that at certain points. Maybe not now because they'll be able to come in June if they're thinking about next year, but sometimes things change and you suddenly need another mentor and there's somebody willing to do it, and that is a way to work in. Right. I'm going to stop there, Pete.
Okay, sir. Well, thanks very much.